Mr. Lally, whenever you're ready.
Good morning, sir.
Good morning.
Could you please state your name and spell your last name for the jury?
Yes, my name is Paul Gallagher, last name Gallagher.
And how are you employed, sir?
I'm a lieutenant with the Canton Police Department.
And how long in total have you been a member of the Canton Police Department?
A total of 32 years, 2 years as a permanent intermittent officer, 30 years full-time.
And you indicated that you are a lieutenant, is that correct?
That is correct.
And how long have you held the rank of lieutenant?
I was promoted to lieutenant August 1st of 2021.
What did you do with Canton Police prior to becoming lieutenant?
I was the detective sergeant from 2018 until I was promoted in 2021.
And what is it, just starting with that, what is it that a detective sergeant does?
So when a patrolman takes an initial report, anything that needs follow-up, the detective sergeant makes sure it's assigned to a detective, usually the next detective working, and make sure that all the steps are taken to manage the cases and bring it to fruition, if possible.
And what is it, what are your general duties and responsibilities as a lieutenant with Canton Police?
Currently, I am in charge of internal affairs, background checks, patrol, and I oversee detectives.
You say currently, what was it prior?
I was promoted in 2021. At that time, Lieutenant Gallagher was the lieutenant in charge of detectives. We have since had a change of police and our assignments have changed.
Now, were you working with Canton Police on the morning of January 29th, 2022?
I was.
And at some point, did you receive a phone call?
I did.
And about what time was that and who called?
That was shortly after 6 a.m. It was Sergeant Sean Good.
And he's a member of your department as well?
He is. He's the 12 to 8 supervisor, which our shifts actually run 11:45 p.m. to 7:45 a.m., but we call it the 12 to 8 shift.
And what, if anything, was indicated to you in this call from Sergeant Good?
Sergeant Good told me he was responding to a scene where a party was found unconscious, possibly not breathing in the snow. He stated his name was John O'Keefe. He was a Boston police officer who resided on Meadows Ave. He further told me that he had gotten a call earlier about John O'Keefe not returning home that night. His friends had called the hospitals, then they called the police, then they went out and looked for him, and they found him unconscious and not breathing in the snow.
And based on that information, what, if anything, did you?
I told him I would respond.
Where were you initially responding to?
I was initially responding to Meadows Ave. I misinterpreted when he said he was a Boston police officer on Meadows Ave. I thought they discovered him on Meadows Ave.
And subsequently, did you learn a different location and respond to that location?
I did.
What was that location that you subsequently determined was where you were going?
When I called the dispatch to find out the exact address, I was told it was 32 Fairview Road.
And that was from the dispatch, is that correct?
That's correct. It was Officer Dever who answered the phone.
That would be Officer Kelly Dever, is that correct?
That is correct.
Now, did you go straight from home to the scene, or did you go stop somewhere else prior to?
I stopped at Canton Police Department prior to that.
And what was the purpose of stopping at Canton Police Department prior to going to Fairview?
I was picking up some winter gear, and I advised Sergeant Good via the radio that all midnight personnel was to be held till further notice.
And you say winter gear, as far as you're responding to a scene, what, if any, other sort of equipment did you procure when you went to Canton Police?
It was clothing. I needed a winter jacket, hat, things of that nature. I was responding in my personal vehicle.
And if you know, about what time was it that you arrived on Fairview Road that morning?
I arrived shortly after 7 a.m.
And when you arrived, what, if anything, was it that you observed upon your arrival?
There were some vehicles pulling away, but parked by where the scene was were 3 Canton police vehicles and 1 black Toyota pickup truck that is assigned to our detectives.
And who, if anyone else, from your department was there at that time?
When I arrived, the three marked units were occupied by Officer Mullaney, Officer Saraf, Sergeant Good, and the Toyota pickup was driven there by Detective Sergeant Lank.
And as far as by the time you arrived, Mr. O'Keefe is no longer on scene, is that correct?
That is correct.
And what, if any, vehicles or apparatus or any personnel from the fire department were on scene by the time that you arrived?
None.
Now, when you first arrived, who, if anyone, did you first sort of speak with on scene?
I first encountered Sergeant Good.
And you had a conversation with him, is that correct?
That is correct.
And then who, if anyone else, did you talk to then?
Detective Sergeant Lank joined us as well.
And following these initial conversations with Sergeant Good and Detective Sergeant Lang, what did you do with that?
Once they updated me on the case, we decided that we had to process where Mr. O'Keefe was found. It was snowing heavily. Sometimes the wind was blowing north, sometimes it was south. It was changing directions, and we discussed how to process where Mr. O'Keefe was found, because at the time we had no idea how he came to be where he was.
And with respect to that, first, as far as where Mr. O'Keefe was, who, if anyone, directed you to where Mr. O'Keefe had been prior to your arrival?
When I arrived and I spoke with Sergeant Good and Detective Sergeant Lang, they updated me on the case. They had told me that Mr. O'Keefe was transported to the hospital, that they were doing CPR on him at that time. They told me that he was bleeding from the mouth and nose, and that he may have had swelling above one of his eyes. They told me that they transported his girlfriend as well, and they told me the circumstances surrounding that incident. They told me that at some point after the phone call to the police station, friends, the woman's name was Kerry Roberts, picked up Miss McCabe and John O'Keefe's girlfriend, Karen Reed, and they drove around and they discovered Mr. O'Keefe on the left side of the property. I would call it the east side of the property, unconscious and not breathing in the snow.
Now, this area that Sergeant Good directed you to, where he indicated Mr. O'Keefe was, you mentioned that it was snowing heavily at this time, is that correct?
It is correct, yes.
And about how much snow was on the ground in this area at the time that you initially went over there?
I would say at least 4 inches of snow.
Now, with reference to, as far as you mentioned, sort of processing the scene, what, if anything, did you and the other officers do with regard to that scene as far as that was concerned?
So it was a unique scene because of the weather. Sergeant Lank had notified Norfolk County CPAC. He had advised them that
Sustained.
I'm sorry, can you rephrase the question, please?
So Detective Sergeant Lang had reached out to Norfolk County CPAC, correct?
That is correct.
And what is CPAC?
It's the State Police Investigative Unit of the District Attorney's Office, Crime Prevention and Control.
And what, if any, as far as that notification is concerned, what is sort of a protocol when you have an unintended death?
So when we have an unintended death, the Norfolk County CPAC unit responds and takes jurisdiction. In this particular case, Mr. O'Keefe was still alive, so they declined to respond at that time.
There may be a term that's pretty well understood, but when you say unattended death, what do you mean by that?
An unexplained death, a person who was alone at the time of their death.
And so at this point, no one from the state police had responded or was responding to the scene at that point.
That is correct.
And so what, if anything, did you and the other officers do with regard to the scene where Mr. O'Keefe had been located in the snow?
So we decided on how we were going to process the area. Our concern was there were some light pink spots in the snow, and we thought it may be blood. So we were discussing how to get to that, uncover the blood safely. We decided we were going to process the scene with a leaf blower. I figured we could direct the snow off the area in a controlled fashion. At that time, Sergeant Good volunteered to go get a snow blower. But what I told him in the meantime, I wanted to photograph the area. I wanted all the cruisers away from the house. There was one cruiser, I believe, occupied Officer Sarif directly in front of where Mr. O'Keefe was. I wanted him backed up. And there was crime scene tape set up, and it was blowing wildly in the wind. It was serving no purpose at that time. There were no civilians or witnesses about. And I knew we had 2 officers who could protect the scene while we processed it. So Sergeant Good, before he left to get the leaf blower, he directed the officers to move their cruisers. I told Sergeant Lank the most important thing he could do at this time would...
Objection. The objection sustained. Move on to your next question, Mr. Lally.
Now, you mentioned that there was some crime scene tape that was set up around, is that correct?
That is correct.
And how was that accomplished?
Sergeant Good and Mike, Detective Sergeant Lank, put out the crime scene tape.
Did you know what, if anything, they were able to use to attach it to in order to set it up around where Mr. O'Keefe had been found?
I believe they used a fire hydrant, a tree, a flagpole, and I'm not sure what else. I don't recall specifically what it was attached to.
And with regard to, you mentioned there were photographs that were taken prior to the implementation of a leaf blower, is that correct?
That is correct.
And if I could just ask a little bit about that. As far as the leaf blower was concerned, why was that a decision as far as that being an implement to use in this particular scene?
It was a unique scene. There was snow. Had never processed a scene in the snow. I had seen a leaf blower used in the snow, and it's quite effective at being controlled. So that's why it was readily accessible. The scene was debilitating as we were on scene with the weather. Snow was piling up, and I thought that was the best method at that time.
And prior to the arrival of Sergeant Good back to the scene with the leaf blower, what, if anything else, was done to sort of document the scene at that time?
In addition to photographs, what we did was, I wasn't sure how the roadway ended. I wasn't sure if there was a sidewalk, a curb, a berm, or whether it was just grass, excuse me. So Sergeant Lank and I dug out what I believe is called a 6-inch Cape Cod asphalt berm, exposed it so we could get a better perspective of how far Mr. O'Keefe might have been off the roadway.
May I approach the witness?
Yes.
Sir, I'm going to direct your attention what's commonly marked as Exhibit 7, 10, 11, 12, 13, 15, 16, 17, 19, 20, 21, 22, and 23. Please just review those yourself and look up on your phone.
Okay.
Your Honor, may we approach this briefly?
Sure.
Madam Court Reporter, could I see the other one? Thank you very much. I know it's to you.
Thank you.
Ms. Gilman, if I could have the first of those photographs up on the screen. If you could enlarge that just a bit. And Lieutenant, I don't believe that's the first photograph before you, but if you could locate that within the
Sure.
file. I
believe that's Exhibit 30.
And if you could just describe to the jury what, if anything, we're looking at in this exhibit.
So that is in front of 34 Fairview Road in Canton. It's looking westerly or the direction towards Chapman Street, and it's documenting the conditions at the time.
May I approach the witness, John?
Yes.
Mr. Lieutenant, at any point, if I ask, or any, this is a waiver.
Yes.
And Ms. Gilman, if I could have the next photograph, please.
That is simply documenting that the number 34 is on the mailbox. That is 34 Fairview Road.
Do you have a number on that in front of you?
Yes, I do. It's Exhibit 22.
Thank you.
There are two of these, I believe, or similar. I just want to make sure I have the correct one. 22. That would be 22, yes.
And what's depicted in that photograph, sir, is that a fair and accurate portrayal of sort of the scene in the roadway when you arrived that morning?
It is. It's the mailbox with the number 34 on it, and it shows two vehicles in the driveway of 34 Fairview Road.
And Ms. Gilman, the next photograph? If you could, Lieutenant, when you locate this, indicate which exhibit we're looking at in this one.
That's Exhibit 28. It's a different angle of the driveway, showing the third car in the driveway. I wanted to document what was in the driveway at that time.
Thank you, sir. Next photograph, Ms. Gilman.
It's Exhibit 29, and basically it documents the same thing. The entirety of the house from a, I guess it would be a westerly view, and the three cars that were in the driveway at the time I arrived.
And the next photograph, Ms. Gilman.
I believe that's Exhibit 31, and it's a close-up of where Mr. O'Keefe was found, and you can see the very light pink spotting that we thought may be blood, and there was an object in the center as well, which we didn't know what it was at that time.
Subsequent, did you learn what that object was?
Yes,
What did you learn it to be?
it was a broken clear cocktail glass, and the pink spot was frozen or coagulated blood.
And the next photograph, Ms. Gilman.
That's Exhibit 23. And it's basically showing that the scene was trampled by rescue workers, witnesses, et cetera, but you could still see, the pink spotting in the area where Mr. O'Keefe was.
As far as footprints within the snow that you observed, you indicated that the scene was trampled or walked over by first responders, correct?
Correct.
And the footprint that you observed, what footprints have you, so what areas around where Mr. O'Keefe's, where it was indicated to you that Mr. O'Keefe's body was, where those footprints located?
They were located between the street and where Mr. O'Keefe was found.
And as far as between where Mr. O'Keefe was found and the house or the residence at 34 Fairview, what, if any, footprints did you observe in that area of the snow?
I didn't observe any footprints at that time.
Ms. Gilman, if I could ask for the next photograph, please.
That is Exhibit 24, and it's showing a westerly shot of the scene. Mr. O'Keefe was found in this area here, and it depicts the wind blowing in that direction at the time.
And probably pretty self-evident, but depicts the wind blowing in that direction based on what?
The other flag flying.
The next photograph, Ms. Gilman.
That is Exhibit 20. That is the I believe it's called a 6-inch Cape Cod asphalt berm that separated the roadway from the property of 34 Fairview. And this is the long look to where Mr. O'Keefe was discovered.
The next photograph, Ms. Gilman.
Again, that's a close-up of one of the exhibits we saw earlier. Again, you can see the spotting and the glass here. This is, I believe this is Exhibit 26.
So, next photograph, Ms. Gilman.
This is Exhibit 27, and it's what we believed was frozen or coagulated blood spotting.
Next photograph, Ms. Gilman.
And that's a different view, close-up of the scene, and that's Exhibit 32.
And the next photograph, Ms. Gilman.
That's when we first uncovered the berm, the 6-inch berm, and it's just a smaller picture close-up of that berm. It's Exhibit 25.
Reference to the sort of uncovering of the berm as you've described it, what, if anything, did you use to uncover the berm?
I believe we just used our foot to uncover that.
And what I believe is the last photograph, Ms. Gilman.
This is the location from the berm to where Mr. O'Keefe was found. It's just a long view, and it's Exhibit 21.
May I approach you on just?
Yes, yes. Tori.
Now, as far as the cruisers with the Canton Police Department, what, if any, sort of recording equipment are they equipped with?
They're with dash cameras, watch guard cameras.
And what, if anything, have you done to review some of that dash camera footage from the cruisers, from that level?
I've reviewed all of it.
And specifically, have you reviewed dash camera footage from the 683 cruiser officer, Sarah's cruiser?
Yes, I did.
And Your Honor, if I may, I would ask that that's already been marked as Exhibit 12. I would ask that a portion of that be played for the jury at this time.
Okay.
And Ms. Gilman, if you could fast forward this to approximately 57 minutes or so into the... Lieutenant Gallagher, do you recognize what's up on the screen in Exhibit 12? I do. And what do you recognize?
That's the video I referred of Canton Cruiser 683 on, it's dated January 29th, 2022 at 7, if the time is correct, 7:02:54.
And around this time, within this video from Officer Sarah's cruiser, what, if anything, did you observe occurring within that cruiser camera footage?
I believe it's at approximately 57:17. You'll see Sergeant Good begin to mark out the scene with yellow crime scene tape. You'll see him in front of the cruiser at first. Him, Officer Mullaney, and Sergeant Lank walk off, and then you'll see Sergeant Good stretching out the crime scene tape.
And if you could, sir, as the video is playing, using the laser pointer that you have before you, just draw the jury's attention to who, if anyone, you observe or recognize within that video.
Yes.
Ms. Gilman, if you could.
The yellow tape it is. There's two officers with yellow crime scene tape. I believe this is Officer Mullaney, but I'm not sure. I know this is Sergeant Good.
And my apologies, Ms. Gilman, if you could play again.
That's Detective Sergeant Lank in the lighter coat. Sergeant Good and Lank, they walk off camera. You'll see Sergeant Good come into the picture right here. They're stretching out the crime scene tape. You can see it flapping in the wind there. You can see it raise way up because of the wind. This is the crime scene tape here. And I'm not sure what they affixed it to, whether it was the cruiser at that point or not. But you can see the crime scene tape going across the scene that way.
Ms. Gilman, if you could pause it right there for a moment. So, Lieutenant Gallagher, in addition to sort of the crime scene tape that you observed in this video, what, if anything else, did you get from the station to attempt to sort of secure the scene or place at the scene?
I'm not sure what you mean.
Did you get a tent at the station?
Excuse me?
A tent at the station?
No, I didn't.
You didn't?
No.
And why not?
I had a tent with me from home. It was a personal 8x8 tent at that time.
My apologies. And so at any point in time on the scene, were you able to set up that tent that you retrieved from your home?
Due to the weather conditions, we did not set it up because it would have required officers holding it down, and we didn't think the top would stay on.
And again, maybe pretty self-evident, but when you say due to the weather conditions, what, if anything, about the weather conditions prevented you from setting that tent up over the scene?
There was high winds, shifting directions, a large amount of snow falling.
Ms. Gilman, if I could ask if you could just pull forward in that video to about the 1 hour, 7 minute mark. Again, if you could hit play from there. Lieutenant, what if anything are we looking at in this portion?
If you look closely, it's the crime scene tape that's blowing around. Right now, you can't see it. Or I cannot see it from here.
Is this around the point where the decision was made to take that down? Is that correct?
It was later on, I observed the same thing, and I told the officers it wasn't doing any good at that time. And there were nobody to keep out of the scene at that point. It was only police personnel on scene.
Thank you, sir. Ms. Gilman, you can stop and take it down. Thank you very much. Now, with reference to the implementation of the leaf blower, was that memorialized in any way as well?
Yes, I had Sergeant Good take a video since we were improvising using something I wasn't familiar with being used before in case there were any questions on how it was deployed. I had Sergeant Good take a short video.
And there's sort of several different short video clips of that process. Is that fair to say?
There's at least one that I know of.
May I approach?
Yes.
I was showing you with this. Do you recognize that?
I don't recognize it. I haven't seen this disc before.
May we approach? Your Honor, with the court's permission, may I publish what's now been marked as Exhibit 30?
20A.
The last exhibit of the disc. If I could publish that to the jury.
Yes.
Anyway, this is 1 through. Sorry, Ms. Gilman, if you could just pause it right there. And Lieutenant Gallagher, do you recognize what's up on screen?
I do.
And what do you recognize?
It's me operating the leaf blower and at the scene where John O'Keefe was discovered.
And who is operating the leaf blower in these videos?
I am.
And who, if anyone else from your department, is sort of present while this process is going on?
Detective Sergeant Lank is documenting, and Sergeant Good is also assisting.
And Ms. Gilman, thank you very much. If you could just play and run it, please.
See, it removes the snow. I was removing the snow layer by layer. And right here, you can see it exposing the cocktail glass. You're going to see red spots appear as I remove it layer by layer. These pink spots start to turn to be dark red spots. As you see, we can control it. We were concerned with whatever other...
Oh, hold on and wait for a question.
As you can see, it just takes it layer by layer.
Hold on for a second. Mr. Lally, Ms. Gilman, can you pause it? So if you have a question for the lieutenant, all right, you're asking him to narrate the whole thing. We're not going to do it that way. And you can pause and then question. It's great you're keeping your voice up over the sound of the leaf blower, but it's a little distracting.
I understand, Your Honor.
So do you have a question, Mr. Lally?
Just briefly at this point, so Lieutenant Gallagher, with respect to as you're conducting this sort of process, what, if anything, are you concerned about as far as throughout this process of trying to locate evidence there?
We were concerned with the weather destroying biological evidence at that time.
And so what, if anything, were you doing with regard?
We were trying to take the snow that had fallen over the blood, and we were trying to remove it to expose the blood.
And fair to say, as far as during this sort of removal process, how much of the snow were you able to sort of sift layer by layer with the leaf blower that you had?
We could control how much I wanted to sift. I did it I started out as gently as possible, and if it needed, more snow needed to be removed, I got a little more aggressive.
Thank you, sir. Ms. Gilman, if you could hit play. And the next video, ma'am. Ms. Gilman, if you could play the third video, please. Thank you. Ms. Gilman, if you could play the last video, please. Thank you. And Mr. Officer, you can put the light on. Thanks, sir. Lieutenant, with reference to that process, how far deep into the snow were you able to go with using that leaf blower in that manner?
We got almost to the ground, bare ground.
As far as sort of a surface area, like how much of that area where Mr. O'Keefe was found were you able to use the leaf blower on?
It was approximately a 6x6, 7x7 type area.
And from that area, what, if anything, in addition to the cocktail glass pieces that you already testified to and the red spots on the ground, what, if anything else, did you observe?
We didn't observe anything at that point. Anything else, just the blood in the glass.
Now, Lieutenant, during the time that you were on scene, with reference to the neighborhood in general, How many people did you observe sort of come out of their house at any point in time that you were with?
I didn't observe anybody ever come out of their house.
And that includes the residence that you were in front of, as well as any other residences along that street, is that correct?
That is correct.
Now, at some point, about how long a period of time, if you know, were you on scene that particular morning?
Approximately 50 minutes, 45 to 50 minutes.
And following that, where did you go?
We brought the exhibits back to Canton Police Headquarters.
And by that, you mean the glass and what you had collected of the blood?
Yep, we took 6 blood samples, yes.
Okay, and how were you able to sort of collect the blood samples on scene?
Well, the blood samples, because they were frozen, we debated on how to collect it. We didn't think swabbing was going to be easy to do if it was frozen. So we decided on finding some type of temporary plastic evidence container. We were able to find large cups, and we took 6 samples. We bagged the 6 samples, and Sergeant Lang transported them back to Canton Police Headquarters.
And with respect to those samples and piece of glass that you located, eventually, what, if anything, was done with those? Well, first and foremost, when you came back to Canton Police Station, what, if anything, did you do with them there?
Chief Berkowitz was at headquarters, and we had a meeting in the detective sergeant's office.
What I'm asking, sir, is with reference to those items that you took back from Fairview, when you got back to the station, what, if anything, did you do?
Sergeant Lang placed them into evidence.
And then subsequent to Sergeant Lang placing them into evidence at some point, where did they go?
They were turned over on February 1st to the Massachusetts State Police Crime Lab.
And was that something where they were driven to the crime lab, or did the crime lab come to the station?
The crime lab was already at the station.
Now, you go back to the police station, you have some conversation with your chief, is that correct?
That is correct.
And what was your chief's name?
Chief Berkowitz, Kenneth Berkowitz.
And following that conversation, at some point, did you return to Fairview Road that morning?
I did.
Okay. And who, if anyone, did you go there with?
I accompanied Detective Sergeant Lang.
And when you arrived, where did you go with reference to the residence?
We went into a side door, and there were people in the kitchen at that time. I believe it was the kitchen area.
And did you know any of the people that were in the kitchen?
I did.
Who, if anyone, did you know?
Who I remember specifically was Jen McCabe, who I don't know personally, but I know because that's who Sergeant Lang arrived to talk to, and I knew Brian Albert in a professional sense.
And so Brian Albert is also a police officer, is that correct?
He was Boston police officer, yes.
Now, as far as any other people, who, if anyone else, were you introduced to when you came into the kitchen area of the home?
I wasn't introduced to anybody. All I know is there were 5 or 6 people there.
And are you familiar with a gentleman by the name of Brian Higgins?
I am.
And how are you familiar with him?
He is an ATF agent who I've worked with when I was assigned to DEA, and he later had a satellite office at our PD, and I have since come to know him personally.
And in reference to your work with the DEA, how long did you work with the DEA?
13 years.
And so, Mr. Higgins, was he present in the home on Fairview when you arrived there that morning?
I don't recall him. When I arrived originally, definitely not. I don't recall if he was there when we arrived about 9 a.m.
And so you don't recall him being there at all?
I don't recall specifically. I never had any conversation with him.
Now, you had made some mention of February 1st, a few days later, at your department, there were members from the crime lab that came, correct?
That is correct.
And what, if anything, did they come there to do?
They were assisting the state police in executing a search warrant on a motor vehicle.
And where was that motor vehicle in relation to your department?
It was in our Sally Port.
If you could just describe to the jury sort of what is the Sally Port, specifically the Canton Police, like where is it located, what does it look like?
Sure, it's on the rear portion of our police department. They are large overhead doors that are numbered, 1, 2, 3, and 4. We only have 2 bays, so the sally port that the vehicle was in, typically, we enter through door 4, and you would exit through door 3. Those doors, overhead doors, can only be controlled by a computer in the dispatch center, and it's where we bring in our prisoners. Once the sally port goes up, you enter, close the door, the area is secure. The rest of the PD is only accessible by access card, key access card.
As you mentioned, sort of the overhead garage doors are accessible only by the dispatch area, is that correct?
That is correct, a computer in the dispatch area.
And then as far as entrance from the department, how if at all, is that controlled?
There is to the right of Sally Port 4, there is a key card access door.
Now, with reference to that Sally Port area, what if any cameras are located in that area?
I know there's cameras in the area. I don't specifically know where they are. I typically don't look for them. I know it is under surveillance, as most of our department is.
And have you reviewed at least portion or the entirety of the Sally Port video from that particular day, February 1st?
I've seen a small portion, yes.
May I approach the witness, Your Honor?
Yes.
Do you recognize what's depicted on that particular flash drive?
Yes.
Okay, what is depicted on that, sir?
CPD Sally Port videos.
You know, call will seek to introduce and admit as the next exhibit.
Any objection?
No, Your Honor.
Exhibit 34.
Your Honor, if I may, at this time, I seek to publish a portion of Exhibit 34 for the jury.
Okay.
May I have one moment, Your Honor?
Yes. Why don't we take our morning recess? Why don't we take a 10, 15-minute recess?
All right, hurry up.
Lieutenant Gallagher, again, from this video from approximately 9:11 in the morning, do you recognize what's up on the screen?
I do.
If you could, just using that laser pointer, direct the jury's attention to what, if anything, is significant you observed in this particular pause of this video.
This is our Sally Port. You would come in Sally Port 4, exit Sally Port 3, like I said earlier. This is the vehicle they were executing a search warrant on, and this is the crime scene tape.
And as far as personnel from the state police that were present there, who, if anyone, was present there that you knew or were aware of?
I knew Trooper Proctor was there, and I knew the criminologist was there, and a photographer. I don't know them by name.
So a couple people from the lab, one taking photos, one criminalist, is that correct?
Correct.
As well as Trooper Proctor?
That's correct.
And do you know Trooper Proctor?
I knew of him. I don't believe I ever met him prior to this. He has worked some cases with our detectives. I knew he was assigned to the DA's office, but I'm not sure if I ever met him prior to this case.
Now, with reference to the vehicle, what, if anything, was placed around the vehicle, or did you observe around the vehicle when you saw it?
There's crime scene tape, as you can see the yellow tape right there.
And just to be clear, the sort of Which part of the vehicle is sort of in the lower foreground of this vehicle?
This is the passenger side rear of the vehicle.
Now, at some point over the course of the time that you were there on February 1st, what, if any, other sort of specialized units within the state police were also present?
Eventually, I think they call it the CARS team. It's what I would call their, I guess, accident reconstruction team responded.
Now, Ms. Gilman, if I could ask you to fast forward within that video to approximately 9:44 a.m. That's fine. Just a little bit back. Right there. If you could just hit play. Now, Lieutenant, during this part of the video, in addition to the people that you've already referenced, who, if anyone else, was in the garage at that time?
It's hard for me to say. I believe this is the criminalist. I believe if this is Trooper Proctor, this is me with the gray shirt, dress shirt, walking in. That's me right there. And that's Trooper Proctor. I believe the photographer or another criminologist is here. I don't know what their title is.
Now, at some point during the execution of this search warrant, what, if any, issues did you become aware of with regard to the criminalist?
They were having trouble. They were trying to remove the housing to the tail light, passenger side tail light, and they were having difficulty removing it.
And what, if any, assistance did you offer with regard to that?
I told them that we had an officer working who was in charge of our fleet maintenance and our mobile operations unit who probably had the tools to do it. And he also had vast, extensive experience in auto body.
Who was that, sir?
That's Officer Brian Wanless.
And what, if anything, did you do with reference to Officer Wanless in regard to that area of the car?
I asked dispatch to ask him to return at approximately, I think it was 9:50.
And Ms. Gilman, if I could ask you to, if it's not already there, move it up to 9:51 a.m. If you could just pause it for one moment, Ms. Gilman. So with reference to this particular portion of the video, Lieutenant, if you could direct the jury's attention to when you see Officer Wanless and when you see him come over towards that area of the vehicle. And Ms. Gilman, for your purposes, what I would ask is we run this from essentially 9:51 a.m. through to about 9:58 and 30 seconds.
This is Officer Wanless right here. He examines it and he leaves momentarily. He dons a pair of gloves. And he exits and he's going to come back with some tools. Here he comes. He places his toolkit on the tailgate.
Objection, Your Honor.
Okay, pause and ask a question.
And from your review of this video, what, if anything, do you observe Officer Wanless do with reference to that rear passenger side taillight?
He re-enters the sally port and with some tools and he places his toolkit down on the tailgate of the Lexus.
And what, if anything, do you observe him do after
He begins to work on the housing of the tail light.
Ms. Gilman, if you could press. Thank you, Ms. Gilman. You can take that. Lieutenant, with respect to the items that you and the other officers recovered from 34 Fairview on the 29th, the criminalist that was depicted in that video, is that who you gave those items to?
I believe so, yes.
You gave those items to her directly, correct?
Yes.
Now, as far as that particular, I believe you testified earlier that you were looking to preserve biological matter, is that correct?
Yes.
And fair to say that your search of that area was confined to sort of where it was described to you, Mr. O'Keefe, had been found, correct?
That is correct.
Now, turning back again just to February 1st, and sorry to jump around, but back to February 1st, at some point you mentioned there was a crash reconstructionist from the state police, is that correct?
That's correct.
And what, if anything, did you aid or assist or facilitate with reference to the crash reconstructionist around the police station?
When they wanted to test the vehicle, I secured the parking lot. I advised no cruisers to return to the station, and I blocked the entryway with my marked cruiser and remained in my cruiser.
And later on that day of February 1st, where, if anywhere, did you go with respect to the crash reconstruction?
We went to 34 Fairview.
In addition to yourself and the trooper from the crash reconstruction, who, if anyone else, went with you?
Trooper Proctor was present.
And why did you go along with the troopers to that location?
Just so there was a Canton officer present. If any residents came out, I could communicate with them.
And to your knowledge, had Trooper Proctor been to Fairview prior to that date?
I have no knowledge if he had been there or not.
What, if anything, did you direct either Trooper Proctor or the crash reconstructionist to once you were on scene?
I brought him to the area of where Mr. O'Keefe was found.
You showed them where Mr. O'Keefe was found?
Yes.
Now, turning your attention to, well, one on scene that day with Trooper Proctor and the crash reconstructionist, what, if anything, did you observe them to be doing that?
I believe they were discussing, they were trying to place a drone up in the air, I believe, to map out the area.
Objection.
Did you see that? Would you want me to strike the, I believe they were trying to?
That'd be our preference.
All right, so that will be stricken, but your observation will remain.
Now, with reference, if I could draw your attention to February 4th of 2022, were you working that day?
I wasn't.
And at some point, did you receive a call in regard to this case, this investigation?
I did.
And who, if anyone, called?
Chief Berkowitz.
And what, if anything, did Chief Berkowitz indicate to you?
He asked me if I was working. When I told him no, he asked who was.
And who, if anyone, did you indicate to him was working?
I told him Detective Sergeant Lank was working.
And as far as what, if anything, was that call in reference to?
He stated he was driving in the area of 34 Fairview because of the warm weather and the warm rain in the last couple of days.
And what, if anything, did he indicate
He
saw?
he believed.
Sustain, I'm going to see it sidebar, please.
And so just to be clear, Lieutenant, you did not go to Fairview Road on February 4th, 2022, correct?
I did not.
I have nothing further for this witness.
All right, cross-examination.
Thank you, Your Honor. Good morning, Lieutenant.
Good morning.
When was the first time you were ever interviewed about your conduct on this case, your involvement in this case?
I don't recall.
It was about a month ago, wasn't it? April 3rd, 2024?
When I was interviewed by, I don't know who you're referring to.
A formal interview by any law enforcement agency.
Oh, I was never, until about a month ago, trial prep, I was not interviewed, correct.
And that interview was conducted by whom?
I met at the DA's office with the prosecutor, Adam Lally.
And there was also a state trooper there,
There was,
Lieutenant Tully?
correct.
Okay. So Michael Proctor never formally interviewed you about your involvement in the case?
No, sir.
Never interviewed you about your involvement on the morning of January 29th, 2022?
No, sir.
Never interviewed you about your recovery of any physical evidence at the scene,
No, sir.
which would include the blood stains as well as the piece of drinking glass?
That's correct.
Okay. Never interviewed you about where that evidence ultimately went and how it made its way back to Canton Police Department?
He never interviewed me, no.
And his partner, Yuri Buknik, also, I won't go through the litany of things, never interviewed you as well?
Correct.
Thank you. And until April 3rd, 2024, nobody from the DA's office had interviewed you either.
That's correct.
Did you write a report about your involvement in the case?
Not on that particular day.
Did you write a report after that?
Yes,
When did you write that report?
possibly January 2023. I believe it was the request for the metadata, the acquisition of the photos report.
Okay, fair enough. Did you ever, I'll narrow my question. Did you ever write a report about your involvement on the day at the scene?
No, I did not.
Okay. So that's not documented, at least by you, that's not documented anywhere.
That's correct.
Did you take notes when you were at the scene?
No,
Did you go back to the station and memorialize your findings and your conduct at the scene by taking notes back at the station?
no, I did not.
So you have no notes and no report about anything that happened at Fairview on the 29th?
Not myself, no.
Were you ever instructed by any superior? You're pretty high up in the ranks. You reported to whom?
At that time, I reported to the deputy chief of police.
Right, either the deputy chief or the chief.
Correct.
Did either the deputy chief or the chief instruct you, Lieutenant, don't worry about writing a report in this case?
No, they never said anything like that.
You would agree that it's one thing to respond to a scene, it's another thing to actually gather evidence at a scene,
That's correct.
especially a scene where it's a potential, at that time, a potential homicide of a police officer.
That's correct.
Part of the reason for annotating, memorializing exactly what evidence is recovered is so you can relay that to other officers, correct?
Correct.
So for instance, in your direct examination just a few minutes ago, you said that you went back to the scene at one point. What was the date where the drone was considered?
February 1st.
You go back to the scene on February 1st. That's 3 full days after the event, correct?
That is correct.
After the incident. And you said, I directed them to where John O'Keefe's body was found, correct?
Yeah, I showed him, yes.
But in fact, you never saw John O'Keefe's body, did you?
That's correct.
Okay, so you were giving them information that you had about which you had no personal knowledge, correct?
I had knowledge from other officers. I did not see John O'Keefe at the scene. He was transported to the hospital. That is correct, yes.
Right. So you couldn't determine exactly how he was positioned, right?
Not precisely.
From head to toe, right?
Not precisely.
Where his arms or his hands were.
That is correct, yes.
He's a 6'2" man, correct?
I don't know.
You don't even know that?
I don't know his size, no.
If I told you that he's over 6 feet tall, would you have any quarrel with that?
If Mr. Lally told me, I would take it as fact.
Fair enough. For purposes of my question, you don't want to take my word for it, but for purposes of this question, assuming that he's over 6 feet tall, there's a better than 6 foot margin for where he would be situated in the snow, correct? From toe to head.
Correct.
And the details matter in a case like this. Any investigation, the details matter.
Sure they do.
Accuracy is vital in a homicide investigation, correct?
Correct.
You did find some blood droplets. We saw it on the screen, correct?
Correct.
You also found part of a drinking glass, correct?
That is correct.
Did you did you endeavor to make a diagram of exactly where those items were found?
No.
You're aware, you were the former chief of detectives?
I was a detective sergeant.
Detective sergeant. You were supervisor over detectives.
Correct.
You're aware what cross coordinates are in measuring a crime scene, correct?
Yes.
You take a stable item like a flagpole, for instance, that might be one that doesn't move. You measure exactly from a compass position, exactly north or exactly west, a number of inches, maybe even down to meters and millimeters if you use that instead of inches, using meters, right?
Yeah, we don't employ that process.
So you don't employ a process where you could measure something from a known item north, south, east, or west, and then measure it from another known item and have an exact cross point of where that's
We don't typically exercise in that in our investigative unit.
You knew how to do that, though.
Yes.
I mean, you'd been trained on how to do that.
Yes.
But you didn't employ that technique here.
No.
So the glass, where the glass was found, it's sort of an estimate.
Sure. Yes.
Okay. And where the blood was found, that's kind of an estimate also.
Yeah, we would guess that would be where his body was, yes.
Okay. You just used the word guess.
Yes.
Right? But if you had actually documented it using cross coordinates, you wouldn't have to guess. You'd know exactly where the tip of his head was, where the tip of his toes were, correct?
No,
Why not?
because he wasn't there when we got there.
Fair enough. When I say you, I meant other officers. If someone had employed that before he was moved, they could have figured out exactly how he was situated, where he was in that yard, correct?
It would never happen. Life-saving measures come first. The officers are not going to start measuring while first responders are conducting life-saving measures. It doesn't happen.
That's exactly right. But once the body was moved, for instance, Officer Saraf, who's literally standing there, could have said, okay, I just saw the tip of his head right here. He's now on the gurney. And he could have measured that, right?
He could have, yes.
And then he could have said the tip of his toes were right here, and he could have measured that.
Yes.
And certainly, when there's no life-saving measures at play, you could have done the same thing with the drinking glass and the blood spots.
That's correct.
And in terms of recovering those blood spots, I'll get back to that in a second, but in terms of recovering those blood spots, you indicated that you used temporary evidence containers, correct?
Plastic cups, I said, yes.
Before responding to 34 Fairview, and you indicated that you were told to respond to 32 Fairview, right?
That is correct.
That was a mistake on either dispatch's part or something.
Correct.
You figured out where to go once you got there.
You can tell by the emergency lights.
It was Sergeant Good who contacted you, correct?
That is correct.
And you were at home at the time,
That is correct.
which is why you needed to respond to Canton PD to get some foul weather gear, correct?
Correct.
You also contacted Brian Albert's neighbor, a gentleman by the name of Tom Gallagher, correct?
That is correct.
And you wanted to let him know that you were responding over to the scene.
Yes, he was the lieutenant in charge of detectives at the time.
Lieutenant in charge of detectives and also the man who lived directly across the street from Brian Albert, correct?
I would say there's two property lines he's directly across from, 32 and 34.
Okay.
But yes, that vicinity.
Okay. Is there a reason that you didn't contact Chief Berkowitz on that day to let him know where you were responding? Why did you pick Deputy Chief Gallagher?
Because that would be my next call. Like I said, he is the lieutenant in charge of detectives at the time. We were responding to a possible crime scene, a possible unattended death. He would be my call.
The normal chain of command?
Correct.
Okay. That you knew at the time that Chief Berkowitz was actually out on leave, having been injured on duty in some way?
I don't recall that. Chief Berkowitz is always present.
Not only did you respond to the scene, but either you were tasked by one of your superiors, or you, as the ranking officer on the, I guess I should ask this first, forgive me. Were you the ranking officer on scene when you arrived?
Yes, sir, I was.
So either having been tasked by one of your superiors, or because you were the ranking officer on scene, did you take over the coordination of the preservation of that crime scene?
Yes, I did.
So others were sort of answering to you.
Correct.
You indicated that you had never preserved a crime scene in the snow before.
That's correct.
30 years plus, and your policing experiences here in the Boston area?
Correct.
Snow's a lot.
Sure.
In 30 plus years, you've never processed a crime scene in the snow?
No, I have not.
Lucky you.
Well, we don't typically process our own crime scenes. Sometimes we use the state police, sometimes we use Plymouth County detectives.
So save the state police, or setting them aside because they were not tasked on this call yet.
Correct.
You were then in charge of preserving this crime scene, right?
That's correct.
What exactly did you do, if you can name the categories? What exactly did you do to actually preserve the entire crime scene?
I'm sure I can tell you that I had Sergeant Good move all the cars so I could photograph the scene, documented by photo evidence. I told Detective Sergeant Lake, make sure he has initial statements from everybody present. And that's basically what we did prior to searching the scene itself.
With regard to Sergeant Lang, you told him to make sure that we had statements, your words, we had statements from all the witnesses that were at the scene.
Initial statements, yes.
Does that mean the people inside the house?
Yes.
Okay. Maybe people across the street, if there were people across the street?
No, it didn't include them at the time. It included people that were involved from the prior night's incident outing, I would call it.
At the time that you tasked Sergeant Lang with this responsibility, did you know personally that you were standing on the property of Brian Albert?
I did.
Did you also know that Sergeant Lang had an ongoing and a long-time relationship with the Albert family?
Objection.
Did you know that?
I know he knew them. I think you're mischaracterizing the relationship.
Did you see a problem with having somebody who knew the parties taking the initial statements from those parties?
Not at all. Sergeant Lake, no issue at all.
Not in your mind.
Not in my mind.
Were you aware that before you got to the location, that Sergeant Lang had taken it upon himself to already make contact with the individuals in the house?
Objection.
I'm going to see you at sidebar, please.
Thank you, Your Honor. May I? Yes. Lieutenant, just before we went to sidebar, I'd asked a quick question. Were you aware at the time that you tasked Sergeant Lang to go talk to the folks inside the house that he had already gone into the house to talk to them?
Yes, I did.
You indicated that one of the reasons, I'd like to move back, I'm bouncing around a little bit, I apologize.
I understand.
One of the things that you talked about was the preservation of the crime scene, and the lack thereof because of the inclement conditions.
Correct.
There was wind blowing from all directions.
Yes.
There was snow falling.
Yes.
It was icy cold out.
Yes.
There was already snow accumulated on the ground, about 4 inches, you said.
At least it was different spots because of the wind drifts.
Wouldn't that be even more of a reason in a potential homicide investigation to adequately preserve the scene as best you possibly could?
Of course.
Wouldn't you want to, for instance, protect the area? You mentioned a tent.
Yes.
Wouldn't you want to make sure that anybody from the civilian side and or officers don't just start traipsing through the middle of the crime scene?
That was all done.
As a matter of fact, the first responders had, the EMTs had already done what they needed to do in the scene, and Mr. O'Keefe had been transported to the hospital, correct?
That is correct.
So that was not a concern.
No,
So nobody needed to be inside that scene that wasn't authorized to be there,
that's correct.
civilian or officers.
That's correct.
Who was it that told you specifically where John O'Keefe's body was?
I don't recall specifically. I had a collaborative meeting with Sergeant Lank and Sergeant Good.
Were you aware at the time that you had the meeting with Sergeant Lank that Sergeant Lank did not ever see John O'Keefe's body in the position?
Yes, I did. I don't believe Sergeant Good did, to my knowledge. I believe John O'Keefe may have been in the ambulance at that time.
John O'Keefe, I'm sorry, I got a little confused. John O'Keefe may have been in the ambulance at which time?
When some of the officers arrived.
Okay. So if that were the case, then they wouldn't have any personal knowledge of where John O'Keefe's body was either.
Not to your precise locations, yes.
You mentioned a tent, and you said that you, in an answer to a question by Mr. Lally, you did not go back to Canton PD to get the tent. You had a tent in your trunk or something?
That's correct.
Okay. When you interviewed with Lieutenant Tully, did he specifically ask you, this is about a month ago, did he ask you about the tent?
I don't recall.
Would it refresh your recollection if you were to review just a small snippet of your report, of his report?
Yes.
About your interview?
Yes.
May I approach you on it?
Yes.
Just look at that and direct your attention to paragraph 4. Tell me if you recognize that document.
I don't recognize the documents. First time I've seen it.
Fair enough. Read the highlighted portion and tell me whether that refreshes your recollection about a conversation you had with Lieutenant Tully about the tent.
Okay, I didn't have...
Read it to yourself.
Yes, okay.
You've read that?
Yes.
May I approach?
Yes.
Thank you. Do you recall telling Lieutenant Tully,
You can ask him if that refreshes his recollection.
does that refresh your recollection at this point?
It doesn't change my recollection.
You said you didn't recollect exactly what you told Lieutenant Tully about the tent. And I'm asking, does that refresh your recollection about what you told Lieutenant Tully about the tent?
Yeah, that's not what I said about the tent.
Okay, so you didn't say, I drove to Canton PD headquarters to retrieve a tent to protect the area where O'Keefe was found from falling snow, but never used the tent due to high winds.
We didn't have a tent at that time.
That wasn't my question. I'm being very specific. Did you say that to Lieutenant Tully?
No, that was misinterpreted.
Okay, so if he got that, if that's in his report, that's incorrect.
It's not accurate, correct?
Okay. Is there anything else that you read in that report that's not accurate?
You asked me to read the highlighted version. That's what I read. I didn't see any. I didn't read any other part of the document.
I may have just a moment, Your Honor.
Yes.
You indicated, still staying at the crime scene on January 29th, you indicated on direct examination that the area adjacent to the blood stains that you saw and the drinking glass that you found, that area was somewhat trampled by you presume, the first responders, the EMTs.
That's correct.
You also indicated that you didn't see any other signs of shoe prints going from the street to the house, correct?
From the scene to the house,
From the
correct.
scene to the house.
Correct.
Meaning, what do you mean when you say that, from the scene to the house?
So the house, you have the house, and the scene was to the far left, actually on the property line with number 32. So I didn't see any footprints. The only other footprints I saw was where the officers walked around and put up the crime scene tape.
Meaning walking through the yard
Correct,
and putting up crime scene tape.
correct.
All right, and if somebody had, how many of those sets of prints did you see?
I don't recall.
Did you photograph or seek to have anybody else photograph the area from the scene to the house?
Just those long shots that you saw in the exhibits.
Okay. And the snow was actively falling at the time, correct?
Yes.
So if there had been a print a couple of hours earlier, you very well might not see it.
That is correct.
I'd like to ask you a couple of questions about the collection of the blood. You found what you thought was blood initially, right?
That's correct.
Pink in color, reddish in color,
Correct.
and you began the process of removing layers of snow, in other words, dusting the area with a leaf blower.
That is correct.
Had you ever used a leaf blower in a crime scene preservation effort?
First time.
First time? And you indicated your testimony was temporary evidence containers to collect that blood, correct?
Yep, we utilized cups, plastic cups.
Those were red Solo cups, right?
That's correct.
The same kind of red Solo cup you drink beer out of at a barbecue?
Yeah, sure, you could.
Objection, Your Honor. Strike.
I'll allow it.
There's nothing special about the red Solo cup?
Other than their plastic, nothing special.
And where did you get those red Solo cups?
We got them from Lieutenant Gallagher.
So in other words, you got the, to use your words, the evidence containers from a neighbor.
Correct.
He had some Solo cups in his house.
Now, we asked him if he had any plastic containers, any type of plastic container that we could utilize.
How far were you from Canton PD? From 34 Fairview to Canton PD? Give me an idea.
Mile and a half.
So even in really bad weather, 4 minutes, 5 minutes, is that right, to drive?
Sure.
You didn't go back to Canton PD to get actual evidence containers, correct?
We wouldn't have temporary plastic containers that what we were looking for. We're looking to take samples of snow. We wouldn't have had, I know for a fact we did not have those. If we needed bags, needle containers, things of that nature, we're all set. But as far as plastic containers that we wanted to utilize, we didn't have them.
Do you have any glass containers?
No.
So Canton PD does not have or utilize evidence collection containers that are plastic?
We have needle containers that are plastic. We have blood swabs that are in plastic containers. But for what we wanted to take a sample, we did not have. So we improvised.
My next question is, certainly Canton PD employs and owns sterile swabs.
Correct.
Sterile swab is in a container that's long, and usually the swab is connected to the lid, pop
Correct.
it out, and then it's sealed
That's correct.
and forensically stable, correct?
Yes.
And the reason that it's sealed and forensically stable is so nothing can contaminate the sample, correct?
Sure.
But
Yes.
just as importantly, the blood sample can't contaminate anything else.
Correct.
Did you go to Canton PD a mile away and get sterile swabs for the blood collection?
Blood was frozen. We didn't think it would be viable.
You didn't think it would be viable?
Correct.
If you touched the swab to cold blood, you think you might get some blood on that swab?
I wasn't sure it would be efficient for testing.
So what you did instead was you gathered red Solo cups from a neighbor, unsterilized, and scooped up the snow with what you thought the blood was, and just carried them back to the truck?
Nope, we took 6 samples, individual samples. Our philosophy was we'll let the crime lab extract it the way they best see fit. Those 6 samples were bagged and then transported back to Canton Police Headquarters and placed into evidence.
Were they covered?
No, not that I recall.
They weren't sealed in any way?
No.
So if somebody sneezed over the top of one of those cups,
They were sealed in a bag, brown evidence bag. At that time, nobody was going to sneeze over the cup.
you have a rough estimate of how many people handled those red Solo cups before they were used to collect blood evidence in this homicide case?
You want me to estimate?
Give me an idea.
Sure, Sergeant Lank.
No, I'm sorry. My question was a bad one. Before you took possession of the red Solo cups, do you have any idea how many people before you had handled those Solo cups?
I took them out of a package, so probably none.
How about before they were packaged?
I assume Solo doesn't sell contaminated cups. I would say none.
So they're certainly not forensically stable. They're not sterile.
By your, I don't know what definition you're looking for, but I would agree.
Do you think it's standard practice for a police department to borrow red Solo cups from a neighbor to gather evidence?
Objection.
You can go ahead and answer that, Lieutenant.
Of course not. Nothing about the scene was standard.
Right. The glass shard. I'll touch on the Solo cups in just a second, but I want to talk about the glass shard of the drinking glass. Were you the one that found the drinking glass?
I was operating the leaf blower and uncovered the glass, yes.
So you were the first one, well, I guess you couldn't tell me if you're the first one, but you noticed it pretty quick.
I wouldn't say it was quick, but we uncovered it.
Okay. And then there is you mentioned a CARS report in your direct examination. There was a report done of where some of these items were found, correct?
You'll have to clarify. I'm not sure what you mean.
Did you mention a CARS report, which is a report of the crime scene, where things were located, mapping of those things?
You objected. It was sustained. I never got to answer that question.
Touche. Your Honor, may I approach?
Yes.
Thank you. Just have to show you a document and see if you recognize that.
I don't recognize it. I could tell you what it is.
That's okay. If you don't recognize it, that's all I needed. Your Honor, may I?
Yes.
Thank you. Are you familiar generally, I don't necessarily need to talk about this one, but are you familiar generally with CARS reports?
Not at all.
Not at all. That's not sort of in your framework?
Not in my realm.
Okay. Are you aware that there is a process by which items of evidence are mapped, or they attempt to be mapped for a crime scene?
I don't do homicide investigations. I'm not aware of that.
Okay. Again, with regard to where the blood drops were found, let me go back to one other question I had. You said you took 6 samples, correct?
That's correct.
Did you precisely indicate in any report or note or diagram exactly which blood drops were in which Solo cup?
I did not.
Okay. As you were using that snowblower and you uncovered the glass cup and more of the blood samples, at any point did you see a size 12 men's shoe black in color?
No.
At any point did you see a man's baseball hat black in color?
No.
You actually dug out a portion of you didn't dig it out, you moved it with your foot, or somebody did, a portion of the berm or the curb that separates the street from the yard, correct?
That is correct.
At any point along that curb line, did you see a men's shoe?
Along the exposed curb line, no.
Did you see it anywhere else?
No.
And you didn't see a hat anywhere else?
No.
You didn't see any bright red taillight material anywhere else.
I did not.
You did not see any clear taillight material.
I did.
Plastic material.
I did not.
You did not see any black plastic material. No. You certainly didn't see 45 pieces of plastic material.
I did not.
If you had found a broken glass, if you find a broken glass on somebody's yard in a situation like this, did that seem out of place to you?
They were coming from a bar. It didn't seem totally out of place, no.
At the time that you found the broken glass, would you rationally think, well, maybe the rest of this glass is inside the residence?
No.
You did not think that.
No, there was a reason that I didn't think that.
Did you think that, well, let me ask you this. Did you ever go inside the house to search for the other part of the glass?
Absolutely not.
Because you made up your mind initially where that glass came from.
Objection.
You can answer that, sir.
No.
Did you search the house for any other matching glasses?
No.
Matter of fact, you didn't search the house for any physical items, did you?
Of course not.
Is that because that house belonged to a Boston police officer?
No, it's because it requires probable cause, as you know, which we did not have.
Or at least you didn't think you had at that time.
We knew we didn't have it.
Did you seek it from a judge?
I'm familiar with what probable cause is.
Did you seek a probable cause warrant from a judge?
No, I did not.
Right. Did you ask for consent to search the house?
We wouldn't do consent, and that's in a death investigation.
Yeah, that wasn't my question. My question
No,
was...
I did not.
Okay. Is that because you were at the house of a Boston police officer?
No, it's because we wouldn't do it. Because if consent is denied, we still don't have probable cause, and we still couldn't search the house.
But you never asked, did you?
Never asked.
According to your interview with Lieutenant Tully, after going to the scene the first time, you then returned back to Canton Police Department, correct?
Yes,
At that point, you remember having a conversation with Chief Berkowitz, correct?
that is correct.
And you indicated that having that conversation with Chief Berkowitz, that was about Canton Police Department recusing themselves.
Not doing any further investigative interviews, yes.
And you indicated actually in that conversation that you agreed with Chief Berkowitz that Canton should be recused, correct?
He agreed with me.
Was your assessment that the recusal should take place?
Yes, it was.
And he agreed?
That is correct.
Okay. And the reason for that recusal was because of the relationship between the Albert family and the Canton Police Department.
No.
What was the reason for the recusal?
The reason was we had a Boston police officer on another Boston police officer's lawn or property, and that property owner was the brother of somebody in our investigative unit.
Okay. That's one way to put it. Another way to put it would be because of the Albert family having a relationship with the Canton Police Department.
It has to do with Detective Albert having a relationship with his family.
Right. Or the other side of that is his family having a relationship with Canton Police Department.
Objection, Your Honor.
Sustained. Go ahead. Move on, please.
What time was that conversation with Chief Berkowitz?
It was after 8 a.m. when we got back to the police department.
You then traveled back to 34 Fairview to interview the homeowners with Sergeant Lank?
Sergeant Lake was doing the interviews, yes, but I accompanied him.
Okay. Approximately what time did you arrive back at 34 Fairview to engage these interviews?
Approximately 9 o'clock.
Were you and Sergeant Lank well, let me ask this. At that time, did you know whether Sergeant Lank had already gone into the home?
Yes, I did.
Okay. So you knew that you were not the first person to go in and make contact with the individuals inside the home. That was Sergeant Lank
Sergeant Lake and Sergeant Good, correct.
before you ever got there.
Correct.
Okay. Did they show you any documentation, notes, or anything of that initial interview?
No.
Do you know whether or not they took notes of that initial interview?
I don't.
Do you know whether they recorded that initial interview?
I know they did not.
You indicated that you personally knew Brian Albert, is that right?
I knew him since I became a police officer, yes.
And so you indicated that you had a professional relationship with him, but not necessarily a personal relationship with him.
Correct.
Did you know that he was in the house before you walked in the house?
No, I did not.
What was your your professional interaction with Brian Albert before you walked into that house that day?
Previously?
Correct.
So in general, as a detective, he was with the fugitive unit at one point. He was helpful when we had a fugitive we needed to apprehend in Boston, things of that nature, job-related things.
Had you ever, for lack of a better phrase, hung out with Brian Albert?
Not a day.
Never socialized with him?
No. Not intentionally. It's possible if I went to a retirement party, could he have been present? Possibly, but not that I'm aware.
But you had no social relationship with him?
Zero.
You indicated that there were 5 or 6 people inside the house, including Brian Albert and Jennifer McCabe.
Yes,
Right?
that is correct.
So you clearly knew those 2 people.
I didn't know Jen McCabe. I know that Sergeant Lake was going to speak with her, but I didn't know her personally. I never had a conversation with her.
What was it about Jen McCabe that you recalled, as opposed to the other 4 or 5 people that were in the house?
Sergeant Lake was talking to her.
You just remember that name?
That's who he went to talk to.
Got it. So he went back specifically with the intent of talking to Jennifer McCabe.
That's correct.
That's when you accompanied him.
That is correct.
Was that interview recorded?
No,
Did you take any notes about that interview?
I did not.
Did you write a report about that interview?
I did not.
You said that there were, other than Brian Albert and Jennifer McCabe, there were 3 or 4 other people in the house.
Yes.
Were those 3 or 4 other people in the house at the time that John O'Keefe was found dead or dying on the lawn?
I don't have the answer to that.
Did you think that might have been an important thing to find out?
Again, I didn't think of that at that time, and I didn't think it was important at that time. I knew that Sergeant Lake had already interviewed people in the house.
You had what you knew at that time, Lieutenant, was you had an officer, a Boston police officer, who was either dead or dying on the front lawn of a house with a bunch of occupants, and you didn't think that it was necessary to investigate or interview those occupants yourself?
No, I did not. At that time, I wanted to not participate in investigative interviews.
You did tell Lieutenant Tully in your interview with him, you volunteered that Brian Higgins was not present when you went back to the house, correct?
I didn't believe he was.
What, you didn't believe he was?
No, I don't recall Brian Higgins being there.
Okay.
I don't recall who the other people were at that time.
But Brian Higgins was not one of them.
I don't know the answer to that. He could have been.
You,
I can't say with certainty.
you know Brian Higgins.
I do.
Obviously, you know him well.
I do.
Matter of fact, you occupy sort of the same space at Canton PD, correct?
That is correct.
You might see him most days out of the week.
No, but I know him.
Okay. As a matter of fact, you've got a social relationship with Brian Higgins as well.
I have been social with Brian Higgins, yes.
So you know him professionally and socially. You can't tell the jurors whether or not he was in that home when you went back over there to interview individuals about a Boston police officer who had fallen and was either dead or dying on the front lawn.
Objection.
Go ahead and answer that, sir.
I can't answer that question. I had no conversation with Brian Higgins, so I don't recall.
You do know that on January 29th, well, let me ask you this. Foundationally, did you go back after that series of unrecorded interviews, did you go back to Canton Police Department and work the rest of the day?
Yes,
Brian Higgins was also at the station for nearly the entire day.
again, I don't recall that.
You aware that Brian Higgins had been granted a key card for the station?
Yes,
And I'm guessing that is a relatively rare thing if you're not a Canton police officer to have a key card and full access to the station.
there were a couple of ATF agents that had that access, yes.
Okay, but he was one of them.
He was one of them, yes.
Is that access restricted, Lieutenant? In other words, does his key card work the same as your key card?
I don't know the answer to that.
He would have, to your knowledge, he roamed throughout the station at will, correct?
I don't know how he roamed. He's a very private person. You very rarely see him. Usually his habits were he'd go up a front stairwell right to his office.
But his accent, I guess I'm struggling with the question. His access was not limited to your knowledge.
I don't know the answer to that. I can't answer that to my knowledge.
He could go into any door he wanted to.
I would doubt it.
You would doubt that it would be limited.
I would doubt he'd have unlimited access. The patrolmen don't have full access. It all depends by your grade. Where he's an outside agency, I'm sure he had limited access.
Who has access to the sally port?
The doors, only whoever's in the dispatch area, the overhead doors. There is one pedestrian door that everybody would have access to.
So he would have access to that as well.
Yes.
Where is Chief Berkowitz's office in relation to the rest of Canton PD, the physical building?
The best way to describe it, I don't know if the jury is familiar with the building, but if you were looking from Washington Street dead on, it's the top floor, far left office.
And is that, I don't know this, I'm not being, this is not rhetorical. Is it 3 floors or 2 floors?
So it's really 3 floors, but it's numbered 1, 1A, and 2.
So he would be on 2, 3 physical floors up.
Correct.
Okay, got it. Thank you. When you had the meeting that you earlier described with Chief Berkowitz, where you indicated Canton PD needed to recuse itself, was that in his office or someplace else?
I was in the office of the detective sergeant.
Which is where?
It's on floor 1A.
All right, we're going to take a 5-10 minute break. Okay, whenever you're ready, Mr. Jackson.
Thank you, Your Honor. You had started to tell us who at the scene who handled those solo cups. Can you describe that for us, please?
I handled them to the scene. Sergeant Lank collected the samples.
Under your supervision?
Yes.
Did anybody other than Sergeant Lank handle those solo cups?
No.
So once they were in his possession, they remained in his possession until they were booked into evidence?
They were bagged, placed in Sergeant Lank's vehicle. He transported them to Camp Police Headquarters, transported it into the office, and logged them in as evidence, yes.
Did you watch all that happen?
I did not.
You did not. So you're presuming those next steps after he was out of your view?
I know that because he told me so.
Well, that's hearsay. Move to strike, Your Honor.
All right, I'll strike the end of that.
Thank you. Not what he told you, what you observed.
I did not observe him place it in evidence, yes.
At what point did you lose sight of those solo cups?
When I got in my vehicle to leave the scene.
So once the solo cups were in his, you saw them go in the brown paper bag,
That's correct.
the evidence bag. Then you saw them go in the truck.
That's correct.
And at that point, you don't have any personal information about what happened to those solo cups. Personal observations.
Until I removed them from temporary evidence, I have no recollection, correct.
I'm going to ask you a couple of questions about once you were inside the home. You've already indicated that you did not seek a search warrant. You did not seek consent to search the home, correct?
That's correct.
Did you look around the house for any sign of a struggle or a fight?
No,
Did you go to the basement at all?
no,
Had you ever been in the house before that morning at 9 a.m.?
never,
Sorry?
never,
Okay. Did you go to the backyard?
no.
Did you personally observe whether or not that house has a bulkhead door that services the basement?
I have no idea.
Did you photograph any portion of the house?
The front of the house,
Sorry, bad question. Good point. Inside the house, did you photograph any part of the house?
no.
Did you have a cell phone with you?
Yes,
Has a camera on it?
yes.
So you could have photographed it, you chose not to.
I would have needed permission or a warrant.
And you got neither.
That's correct.
You sought neither.
That's correct.
Did you photograph any of the individuals in the home for instance, for injuries or anything like that?
No,
Did you or Sergeant Lank separate the witnesses before they were interviewed?
There was only one witness he was interviewing,
Who was that?
Jen McCabe.
Okay. Where was everybody else in the house?
I believe they were all in the same area, the kitchen. I believe it was the kitchen.
Those individuals were not taken to a different part of the house.
Not that I'm aware, no.
They were allowed to communicate with and among one another.
Sure, yes.
And I think you already answered this, but I'm going to ask it just to make sure I'm clear. None of that interview of Jen McCabe was not recorded in any way. Audio or video recorded.
Correct.
How long were you inside the house for that interview?
10 minutes, maybe?
Other than Jen McCabe being interviewed, were any of the other witnesses inside that house asked any questions by Sergeant Lank or by you?
No, not that I believe so. Not that I recall.
Were you the person on February 1st who gave access to the Massachusetts State Police to the Sally Port?
I was probably one of them. The Sally Port doors can only be opened by dispatch.
Did you approve or authorize those doors to be opened for purposes of MSP coming in, Massachusetts State Police coming in and processing that vehicle?
I don't know if I specifically did it at that point, but I certainly would, yes.
You knew that the vehicle had been in that Sally Port since January 29th in the afternoon, correct?
I don't believe what point I knew it was in the Sally Port, but I did know it was there for days before, yes.
Okay. And if it had been there from January 29th to February 1st, that's 3 full days.
That's correct.
From the time that that SUV arrived and was situated in the Sally Port, how many people had access to that truck, that SUV?
How many people had access or access to the Sally Port, or is that one, are you asking one
One
of
and the
the?
same.
I would say the entire department.
Dozens.
Yes, correct.
Hundreds?
No, we're very small.
I don't know that, so
We're probably 45.
45. And just about every one of those 45 people would have access to that Sally Port and that SUV had they wanted to.
Had they wanted to, yes.
And that 45 doesn't include Brian Higgins.
It probably does, but he would have access as well.
Thank you. Those same individuals that would have access to the SUV inside the Sally Port, very obviously, would also have access to anything else that had been placed in the Sally Port, along with the SUV, correct?
That is correct.
Did you photograph or cause to be photographed that SUV immediately upon its arrival into the Sally Port on January 29th?
I wasn't working, no.
Did anybody, to your knowledge, seek to photograph the condition of that vehicle immediately when it arrived at the Sally Port?
I wasn't there, I can't say.
You've certainly never seen any photographs from January 29th immediately when that SUV was brought into the Sally Port, right?
Other than our evidence, I haven't seen any evidence in this case.
You indicated that Massachusetts State Police was having some difficulty removing the light. We saw a short snippet of the video, correct?
Yes, that is correct.
Who made the decision to even remove the taillight? Was that Canton PD or was it Massachusetts State Police?
That would have been somebody within the state police.
Okay. And then you contacted Officer Wanless to actually facilitate the removal of that light, right?
I contacted dispatch to ask Officer Wanless to return.
And you knew at the time that Officer Wanless was a sworn Canton police officer.
That's correct.
But Lieutenant Gallagher, you told us just a few minutes ago that you and the chief, actually you and the chief agreed that the Canton Police Department was completely recused from this case and the investigation based on a conflict of interest, correct?
No, you're spinning it. What I said was from participating in investigative interviews.
So they could take part, Canton Police Department could take part in any other part of the investigation, according to you, with the exception of investigative interviews?
We can open doors, we can facilitate things, yes.
Remove
Yes,
taillights?
there's nothing, no, yeah, if it's an assist, round peg, round hole, absolutely, yes.
Okay, so in other words, Canton Police Department, notwithstanding the conflict of interest, was still allowed to participate in the investigation of the Karen Reed matter.
There was no conflict of interest. I said appearance of conflict of interest, so we have to be careful. I didn't believe there was a conflict. I honestly believe we could have investigated this case,
Well, you
but it
also-
wasn't the appearance of such a conflict.
You also didn't believe that there was probable cause to search the house either.
I know that.
That answer will stand. It's stricken, and so is the question.
So Canton Police Department was in fact, at your authority, given permission to manipulate that light in terms of pulling it out of the SUV, correct?
Objection.
Sustained.
Canton Police Department was allowed to facilitate the removal of that light.
Yes,
And during the course of the removal of that light, a taillight was broken, correct?
that's correct.
And shattered.
Yes.
Parts of it that were falling onto the ground.
I don't think there was anything falling on the ground at that point.
So now we do have evidence that that taillight, in some way, shape, form, or fashion, was broken or broken more once it was inside the Sallyport in Canton PD's custody.
You're going to have to rephrase that. I don't understand the broken more part.
During the removal process, that light was broken even more.
No.
May I approach you?
Yes.
Just take a look at that photograph and tell me if you recognize it.
I don't recognize the photographs. First time I've seen it.
Do you recognize what's depicted in the photograph?
It's a broken taillight.
Does that appear to be the taillight that was removed during the process that we saw on the video just a few minutes ago under direct examination?
I can only assume it is. I've never examined the light.
So you can't assume. So can you answer the question, Lieutenant?
No.
You don't recognize it?
No.
Okay, and were you, I didn't see you on the video, but it was a very dark video. Were you there?
Yes, I'm in the gray shirt.
Okay, were you there as Officer Wanless was actually removing the taillight from the vehicle?
Not sure. I'd have to watch the video again.
Okay, do you recall if pieces and parts were being broken off and shattered while he was removing it?
Not at all.
May I approach?
Yes.
Were you the person who actually recovered? I think you did answer this. You were not the person who knelt down and actually recovered the blood droplets.
Correct.
That was Sergeant Lang.
That's correct.
When you gave the, sorry, let me rephrase that. Was it you or Sergeant Lang that put the solo cups into the evidence bag?
Sergeant Lank.
Was that in your presence?
Yes.
Okay. How long before, after he put the solo cups in the evidence bag, did he put the evidence bag in his truck?
Seconds, less than a minute.
And then how long did the truck sit there until he left or you left and you were no longer able to observe it?
He left immediately.
You were at the location the location of the Sallyport on February 3rd. You've already testified to that, correct?
No, I testified February 1st.
I'm sorry, my mistake, February 1st. You also indicated that at your direction that Sergeant Lank booked the solo cups into the evidence locker.
That's procedure, yes.
Right. I understand it's procedure. I'm asking if he actually did it.
Yes.
Okay. Did you see a log of that?
Excuse me?
Did you see a log of that?
I saw the police report.
Which police report?
The original call.
Okay. And in that police report, he indicates that he took the solo cups back to Canton Police Department and booked them into evidence, right?
It was given a property number and assigned to temporary evidence.
And when something is given a property number, is there an officer working that property area to assign the property numbers?
No, the officer placing the property into evidence assigns the property number himself.
I see. So that officer would assign a property number and physically place that into temporary, what's it called again?
Temporary evidence until the evidence officer takes custody of it.
Okay. Did an evidence officer actually take custody of these items?
No, because it was being transferred to the state police, so it wasn't going into our permanent evidence locker.
So where did those cups sit for the 3 days between January 29th and February 1st?
In a refrigeration unit in temporary evidence.
And is there a log to sign in and sign out to make sure that the chain of custody of items like this are maintained?
The evidence officer keeps that log, yes.
Okay. Is there any log, Lieutenant Gallagher, of these items being booked into the temporary evidence locker?
There should be, but I don't know for a fact, but there should be, yes.
I agree there should be. I'm asking you if there is.
I don't know the answer to that.
The fact of the matter is, there is no log or document or report ever showing that these items were ever booked into the temporary evidence locker at Canton PD. Isn't that right?
I don't believe that's accurate.
Do you have that evidence log?
I don't have access to the evidence log.
Could you get access to the evidence log?
No,
You're a supervisor at Canton PD.
That's
Why would you
correct.
not have access to the evidence log?
I think only 2 or 3 people have access to evidence.
Who would they be?
The evidence officer,
Which is who?
Paul DiGiapietro, Sergeant,
Can you spell that for us, please?
DIGIAMPIETRO.
Who else?
I'm not sure, to be honest. I'm assuming the chief of police,
Chief Berkowitz, I would assume?
most likely.
Deputy Chief?
But I don't know. Possibly, yes.
Head of detectives?
No,
Any other lieutenants or supervisors?
I don't believe so. I know I don't have access as a lieutenant.
If there's no evidence log of an item being booked into evidence, that's a pretty good indicator that it actually never made it into the evidence log, evidence locker, correct?
Objection.
Sustained.
We do know that wherever it went, the blood items went back to, and the glass went back to Canton PD, correct?
That's correct.
May I have just a moment, Your Honor?
Yes.
May I approach briefly?
Yes.
Thank you. Lieutenant, I'm going to ask you kindly to take a look at those 4 photographs, and then once you've had a chance to review them, just look up at me, and I'll ask you a couple.
Did you see them?
I don't know what was just handed to the witness.
Why don't you go take them from the witness? Take a look.
Here you go. There's copies right here as well.
Thank you. That's fine.
Just 4. Not 5. Yeah, this is 4. Okay. May I approach briefly?
Yes.
Sure.
To make sure I'm sure if there's 4 or 5.
Okay.
Take your time.
I'm all set.
Do you recognize those photos, or what's depicted in those photos?
Yes.
Do you recognize the time frame that those photos would have been taken
Yes.
based on context?
Yes.
February 1st, correct?
I have no idea if it was February 1st, but it would be between the 29th of January and February 1st.
Fair enough. Your Honor, may I publish?
Okay. Do they have they been introduced?
They have They have not yet been introduced, Your Honor. I'm sorry, protocol-wise, I missed that step. I need to ask if these be marked as next in order.
Okay.
Four
Is there
photographs.
any objection?
No, Your Honor.
Start with. That green one. Yeah, no, I might be able to use this.
Ready?
Yes. Take it.
37 through 40.
Thank you. Taking a look at what's been.
Hold on. They're still being marked, and the court reporter has to record everything you say.
Thank you.
Okay.
And with the court's permission, Lieutenant, I'm going to try to go in the same order, so you might want to glance at this photograph. It may be better visual for you. I'd like to ask you if you recognize what's depicted in this photograph, especially the area right down here on the right, bottom right. You see that white rag?
I do.
Lieutenant, if you take a close look at that rag, I'm going to ask you to identify it on the photograph. Do you see a couple of little dark marks on what appear to be that
I see it on that screen.
better visual up there? Okay, fair enough. What's the position of that rag as it relates to the vehicle in the photograph?
It's the rear passenger side.
Right rear quarter panel, correct?
Yes,
Okay. And is that, in fact, the SUV in question?
I believe it is.
Okay. The SUV that belonged to Miss Reed?
I believe it is, yes.
Okay. Let's take a look at the, excuse me. It's 37.
37, okay.
Is this 37? Yes. Thanks. Your Honor, for the record, we were just speaking about item 37.
Okay.
Let's move to that. Yes. Looking at 38, does that appear to be the same rag in the photograph?
It does, yes.
Okay. You see a shadow sort of looming over the top of the photograph?
I do.
Given what you just said about evidence item 37, does that appear to be the shadow of the right rear quarter panel of the truck?
I would guess it's the tailgate.
So you can't guess.
I would say it was the tailgate. The tailgate's up, maybe the tailgate's up at this point.
You see a bag in the middle of the photograph.
Yes,
Can you read what's on that bag?
Stop and Shop.
Okay, that does not look like an evidence bag, does it, sir?
No,
Matter of fact, it looks like a grocery bag.
correct.
Is that right?
Yes,
So, not a forensically stable item, correct?
correct.
Certainly not sterile.
Correct,
Right.
correct.
You know where that bag came from?
I do not.
Was that a bag that you supplied to Sergeant Lank?
I do not know. Do not recall.
Sergeant Lank got the Stop and Shop bag.
I do not know.
Next photograph, please. 39. Taking a look at what's been marked as evidence item 39, you recognize what's in the middle of the photograph?
Yes,
What is that?
those are the plastic cups with the coagulated blood.
Do you see on the top of the photograph the same rag
I do.
with the same markings?
Yes,
That appear that those unsealed cups with liquid blood in them are situated right near the right rear quarter panel of the SUV in this photograph?
they are to the rear of the vehicle. Yes.
And next item, please. And this appears to be evidence item 41, I'm sorry, 40. You see the same white rag.
Yes.
and you see the same evidence bag, Stop and Shop bag, correct?
Correct.
And it's filled with 6 solo cups
Correct.
with what appears to be liquid blood.
Correct.
Does that photograph appear to be taken at or about the same place near the right rear quarter panel of the SUV?
It's actually, I would say that the mat is the mat to the entrance to the booking area, so that is probably a couple of feet behind the vehicle.
Okay. Let's go back to evidence item number 37, which would be the first photograph. You see the rag in that photograph?
Yes, I do.
Let's go to the next item. Now you see the mat, and it's, I'm sorry, I should note this for the record, that we're now looking at 38. You see the mat and the rag in this photograph,
I do.
and you see a tire on that mat.
Yes.
That's a golf cart of some sort that belongs to the Canton Police Department.
It's a Kubota, yes.
A Kubota, thank you. Looks like the rag is in the same spot.
Yes.
All right, so the blood inside the Stop and Shop bag is sitting right next to the right rear quarter panel of that truck, correct?
You can see the rear tire. It's probably at least 3 feet from the rear. If you look at the top, I can use the marker here. This appears to me to be the rear tire, which would put this a couple of feet behind the vehicle.
Understood. Okay, that's all I have. Lights. Would you agree that having unsealed and unsecured blood next to the right rear portion of the SUV is a recipe for cross-contamination?
You want me to speak to, if I could speak to this incident alone?
That's a yes or no question. Do you think
Okay,
that's a...
it's not yes or no, but for your purposes, I would say yes.
Okay. And in fact, could even be worse, for instance, not just inadvertent cross-contamination. If somebody wanted to touch something on that bag, on those cups, and then touch the vehicle, they could easily do that with that juxtaposition of the open blood next to the back of the rear of the car.
Objection.
Sustained.
Lieutenant, if somebody was so inclined, that situation could provide an opportunity for evidence tampering, couldn't it?
Objection.
Sustained.
May I have a moment, Your Honor?
Yes.
I have nothing further at this time, Your Honor.
Okay. Mr. Lally?
It's just briefly, Your Honor.
It's a tough one.
Now, Lieutenant, if I could ask you, a phrase that was posed to you a couple times during cross-examination as far as recusal of your department, how would you define that term in this specific sense?
In this specific case,
Yes.
we did not want to go on any investigative interviews because one of our best investigators, name is Kevin Albert. He's the property owner's brother, and we didn't think it would be appropriate if we were on those interviews questioning his family members.
Now, with regard to death investigations, specifically unattended death investigations, what, if any, role does your department typically have when it comes to those? What, if any, jurisdiction does your department have versus the state police?
The state police takes jurisdiction. They run the investigation. We assist them in any way we can. We try to help out.
Now, sir, you were asked some questions in regard to, well, you indicated that in regard to the drinking glass that you located in the area where Mr. O'Keefe's body was, that it didn't come from the house. Why is that?
I think I said, I believe we didn't think it came from the house at that time because they were out at the Waterfall Bar and Grill the night before. And the initial statements from Detective Sergeant Lank and Sergeant Good obtained, nobody put John O'Keefe anywhere but where he was found, and that included his girlfriend.
Now, if I could take a step back just to the state police jurisdiction over unattended deaths, what, if any, assets does the state police have as far as investigative assets that your department doesn't?
They have far superior tools to investigate. They have direct access to the crime lab. They have a CARS team that can do accident reconstruction.
Now, with regard to the criminalist and turning your attention to February 1st of 2022, when you're in the Sally Port, you mentioned that Officer Wanless came in with a toolkit to assist in removing a tail light, correct?
That's correct.
And is it your understanding, essentially, he just removed a clip from the back of the tail light in order to take it out of the vehicle?
I believe you can see on video, it just pops into the criminalist's hands.
And as far as your review of that video, your observations that day, there was nothing about the tail light that was broken during that removal process, correct?
Correct.
Now, as far as cross-contamination, you were asked about, you indicated it was not a yes or no answer. What if anything else, would you have to add to that?
What counsel was depicting was the transfer of custody over to the state police. So the criminologist was handling it at that time. The photographer was photoing it. The criminologist was transferring the blood into their plastic containers. And that's why I'm sure it was being handled by a criminologist. There wasn't going to be any cross-contamination. I wasn't concerned about cross-contamination.
So that was a scenario that you were describing earlier in your direct examination, as far as you're turning those items physically over to the criminalist on February 1st in the Sally Port area.
And they are converting them to their plastic containers, yes.
Thank you, sir. Nothing further.
Okay.
Very briefly, you said that no one put John O'Keefe, none of the witnesses put John O'Keefe anywhere but where he was found. That's what you just said, correct?
That's correct.
So your investigative technique is just to ask a witness, how'd that dead body get there? And if they say, I have no idea, your job's just done, right?
Objection.
Sustained.
If a witness says, we found him here, you just take the witness at their word?
Objection.
You can go ahead and answer that, sir.
No, of course not.
You might want to investigate a little further, right?
Absolutely.
And
Correct.
ask him questions.
That is correct.
Get search warrants.
That's
Look
when
in the
there's probable
house.
cause, we do. Absolutely.
None of that was done here, though.
No probable cause.
Thanks. That's all I have.
You are all set, Lieutenant.
Thank you.
Okay. Who is your next witness, Mr.